Let's get some notes up and then we'll jump into this. Here, there we are. So, sorry, a little bit of ramifications of the flu is that I cough every now and again, so I'll try not to do that down the microphone. Anyway, today we're going to discover that Job's famous story is so much more than we've ever imagined. Well, that's my hope anyway, when I certainly came across this and a slightly different way of looking at what's happening in Job. There was a number of things that blew my mind. I was saying to Rob this morning, I was bought a book for Christmas, and I'm only about 70 pages in, and it's already reframing the way that I'm looking at part of the New Testament, and I'm just like, I'm kind of thinking, how am I going to get to this book when we get there on this journey and include all this stuff that I'm now learning, thinking, why didn't I know this already? And that was similar to this experience when I first encountered this teaching on Job, is that there's just so much going on. But I'm like, why have I never known this before? Why has nobody ever unpacked this for us? Why have we just taken this as a really flat sort of perspective on this incredible story? So we've probably all heard this before, Job, or kind of know the story a little bit. The guy loses everything. Satan and God have this weird bet, which is a bit strange, isn't it? And we kind of get this, and I've heard all sorts of like theology based on this, and where it becomes really dualistic and it kind of goes where this battle is, where in the New Testament we're told the battle is between us and Satan. People go like, oh no, it's not, it's between God and Satan. It's like, no, it's really not, guys. God, but it's really weird stuff that goes on. And he loses all his family except for his wife, which the way she treats him probably, I don't want to make that look too dark and more, but my goodness, she treats him horribly. She's like, come on, curse God and die. That's everything's gone wrong. Just do it, just die. And the typical view of the book of Job includes that first opening portion that we've had read to us. And then what people tend to do is they tend to just skip to the end where God shows up and does his thing. And it goes like, oh, it's all right. God will make everything all right, because that's what happens. And we kind of get this real false narrative of what it means to suffer and to walk through suffering, and you can kind of see why, actually, because we kind of want that comfort. And right after he loses everything, his friends come and they do the right thing at first, and then the whole book just becomes an entire drama on doing the wrong thing, like how to be a bad friend. And really, that's what we could have titled this this talk. But then I'm not really going to look at the friends too much. But we could have just done this whole sermon series on how to be a bad friend and pick out the bits out of Job and go like, this is how to not win people. In any way, shape or form, never mind to the faith and all that sort of thing, but just how to not love people well. But anyway, so we kind of understand the themes, and it almost feels like it's getting worn out. And then all of a sudden, at the end, there's this hook, and this young guy named Elihu shows up, and then God finally shows up, and he doesn't really do what you wanted. Not really. We kind of go, oh, God does his thing, and he makes it all well and all good, but he doesn't really. Not really. It's pretty straightforward route, though. It spoke about suffering, and when you think about it, it's like that book about suffering, it's just weird. It is a weird book. It doesn't answer our questions about suffering, really. We try and make it do so, but if you read it and look at it, it doesn't really answer our questions about why suffering happens, or what it means, or if God's all powerful and he's got this bet and stuff like that, what on earth is going on? And the characters are doing weird things. It's just weird. So let's make some observations about Job right off the bat. So first of all, Job is a drama. And this may be a shocker to everybody, but it's a play. And it's like when I was at school at different points in English class, you'd have to enact a play, and everybody would get their parts. And I can remember, first time reading Shakespeare at school. And I think actually my English teacher was a bit of a sadomasochist because they did Richard the Third or Second. I can't remember which one it was now, but it was one of the Richards, because I know Shakespeare's done a couple of them, hasn't he? And it was hard, and it was dreadful. And, we was year 8. I was going to say year 7, but it was year 8. And you can imagine it's year 8 boys, who were just more concerned about playing rugby than, learning Shakespeare. It was horrible. But we knew what we were looking at, and we kind of knew that this was a play. But it was a play based on a real-life figure. See, Job is a drama. It's not to say that the drama isn't based on an absolutely true tale. Maybe there is a man named Job. I think actually there probably was at some point. In fact, the Midrash says that Job was a real guy, which is why I think he was a real guy. And so a little fun fact, a little tidbit for you. We're not going to go into it too much, but just a little bit of background story for you. Do you remember Dinah from Genesis? We did look at Dinah back in the many moons ago. Well, she was going to marry Shechem, and they all got murdered after the rape of Dinah. Well, Dinah in the Midrash goes on to marry Job. And Job ends up being, and she ends up being Job's wife, the one who says, just curse God and die. Which in the Jewish tradition gives you a little bit of perspective as to why on earth is my daughter phoning me? In the middle of a church service. Anyway, sorry, slightly distracted, but it does give you a bit of a perspective of why she's so glass half empty. I mean, there's horrific stuff happened, but her perspective is like, well, horrific things do happen. You just curse God and die. Just that's all that's left. And secondly, as well, just so you know, the Midrash also teaches that Job is one of the magicians in Egypt. You remember the magicians in Pharaoh's story? There's 3 of them, isn't there? Well, one of them's Jethro, according to Midrash, as in, the father-in-law of Moses. One of them is Job, and the other one is Balaam, as in Balaam and the donkey. Just as, slight asides, all these 3 biblical characters, and you're like, what? That's crazy. That's mad. I've never known this. But that's kind of what you do when you start to discover Midrash. You kind of go like, man, that's weird. That's strange. But it does give a bit of a backstory about what's going on. You can Google it. Dead easy to find. You can read into it. It's great. It's amazing. And it'll boggle your brain a little bit, but what a way to start New Year by looking at some Midrash stuff. But it does give us a little bit of a backstory to the character of Job, and maybe a slightly different perspective about what's going on. Now, the quicker ones amongst you will be thinking, wait a minute, Gavin, if Job is one of the magicians in Pharaoh's court, that would mean that Job is a pagan. And my answer would be yes. Where does it say in that reading that we've just had that Job was Jewish? Nowhere. In fact, in Jewish tradition, this poor guy is a pagan. Nevertheless, it's a drama, and when you read Job like you would a play, you engage with this. And to be honest, I think if you've got when you put this together with the story of the plagues, and you see the defeat of those magicians and the things that they can't replicate, and they've encountered the real living God, all this stuff that we've had and we've seen in this passage, and you kind of go like, well, where's his faith come from that he would, respond to this and go, well, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Like, he's seen so much. He's experienced so much. And although he's a pagan, he's a God-fearing pagan. He's somebody who has placed his faith. But there is this play in order, in action. The second observation about Job, and it's interesting to note, is that Job's friends are partaking in a Jewish practice that we're not familiar with. It's not within our context. But I think we've talked about it at least once before, and that's the concept of sitting Shiva, or Shiva, which I hope you're not this morning. It's certainly getting warmer as the time goes on. But to sit Shiva is something that you do with somebody that's in grief. In Jewish culture, when a person is in a period of grieving and loss, a friend show up and sit Shiva with the griever. And you're not allowed to speak unless you are spoken to, and you're just there to be present for the suffering. And it's such a great passage. You don't say anything. You don't try to console them. You don't try to explain it. You just sit with them. And now, if you want to ask a question, if they address you, you can talk to them. But that's not your job. It's not why you showed up. It's such an interesting thing. And it's actually totally countercultural to our society, isn't it? If someone's going through a hard time, you rock up with maybe some food, or you feel like you kind of got to have some sort of explanation, or show some sort of sympathy or stuff. Not just coming and sitting with people and not speaking. But that's the culture. So the third observation before we jump into this stuff is, I've placed Job as an exilic prophet. Now, people often kick back against this on a couple of different levels. Many conservative Bible teachers would teach that Job is one of the oldest stories in the Bible. That is a really prevalent idea, and I was certainly taught that, and I've taught it in the past as well. And there are elements of a story that seem to resonate with a much older Hebrew prose, and somewhere around the dates of Abraham even. So the question is how long do you think that we've been wrestling as the human race with the problem of suffering? Oh, what? Yeah, forever, yeah. Absolutely. Depending on how you want to talk about it, in the Bible, you can go all the way back to Cain and Abel, maybe even to Adam and Eve. Like the whole time, we've struggled and we've debated and we've wrestled with the problem of suffering. And I can imagine that the roots of the story of Job really do go way, 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 way back. However, there are many elements of the story that seem to be problematic about putting this story back to the days of Abraham. Some of the content of the book just doesn't match with that period of time. Like, there are references to the zodiac when it talks about Pleiades and Orion. Those are concepts that just wouldn't have been around in Abraham's day. That's not how they dealt with the zodiac back then. The language surrounding the beasts, etc., and stuff like that, that's just not how they would have talked about that in that time period. It's much later. Additionally, the blatant reference to Satan, even that we've had talk this morning, the idea that Satan and God would have this conversation and this debate, and Satan would be personified in some description, that's incredibly Hellenistic. That's, thousands of years later to dating this as old. It's unheard of in early history. And there's another prevalent theory, especially among Jewish thinkers, that the book of Job belongs to the book of wisdom. to the books of wisdom. And that's the other perspective that often gets taught. Well, Job should be a wisdom book. And in fact, I absolutely agree. Yes, it is. It should be. But I've placed it here in the exilic period, and with the exilic prophets. And I chose not to go through Job when we went through the wisdom literature on purpose. But it is wisdom. There is so much wisdom in this. See, I think all three of those things that we've just kind of unpacked are absolutely true. I imagine the story of Job would be a very, very ancient tale. Humans have been wrestling with this question about suffering ever since the dawn of time. I can see the character. Remember how we like to remake movies? It feels like I get super frustrated these last few years because there's so many things that are just remade and remade and remade and remade. And how many times can we, buy into the same thing? Although hand on heart, I love Marvel. I grew up reading Marvel comics and stuff, and I've loved watching all these things, stuff come to life. But you think about Christmas Day, for those of you who are here, and Maisie's little character, which was called Grump. No, not Grump. Scrump. That was it, like scrumping apples. Yes. That's just a rehash, isn't it, of the same story of what they did for the first one, and just adding a little bit into con parents out of money for cuddly toys. We'll just remake a movie to death, won't we? How many Robin Hoods do we really need? Did we really need, back in the 90s, did we really need Kevin Costner and his dodgy accent? Exactly. See, I can guarantee you, though, that at a time where culture takes a turn to where we feel the rich are really taking advantage of the poor, that we'll get another Robin Hood movie. Because it tells a narrative that we like, that gives hope for those who are downtrodden and depressed. And I think that Job is also one of those stories that probably got remade and rewritten and reshaped and retold. And I do see, and I don't know if Solomon himself, but I imagine a character like Solomon taking the ancient tale and then reworking it as this brilliant wisdom literature. Now, that's not to take away from anything at all about the inspiration, the authority, or anything, how we've received this and how it appears within our canon and within the Bible. It is absolutely authoritative, absolutely. And it's not to diminish it the slightest little bit, but there are lots of things going on in this. So we're going to see, by the time we're done today, I think that there's a real treasure buried in the book here. If we thought that Daniel was a treasure trove with a double chiasm, then Job is like that, but on steroids. And it's unbelievable. And I think it could have started as a tale. And then I can see somebody like Solomon rewriting it as wisdom literature. And then I can also see somebody coming along later, centuries after Solomon, now as they sit in Babylonian exile, and what story do they go to? Where do they go for their hope and for their, and to give some sort of perspective about what's happening in their lives? Is they go to Job. We're suffering in Babylon. And so they go to Job, and as we go to try to understand and unpack suffering, I can see them adding a little intro, adding a little outro, and about Satan using a little common to their day language, Hellenistic period, and they add a little intro, and they add a little just rewrite here and there, and a reshaping, and just so that it fits into their culture, and it doesn't really matter to me. Now that might make some people uncomfortable. But, like I said, it's an inspired, authoritative book of the Bible. Whether it got to me late or it got to me early, it doesn't matter. Because at some point it got to me in the form that we have it in our scriptures. That inspired, authoritative drama. And I'm good either way. That's my hunch. I don't really get to have a hunch because I don't have a PhD, so I've not written loads of original research on it. All I've done is read quite a few different people, and I think this is kind of where I'm landing on this. So, my last observation, and this is the big one, is that, guess what Job is? Take a guess. What do you think this might be? Begins with a C. It's a chiasm. It's not just a chiasm, it's a chiasm of chiasms. It is a chiasm of chiasms of chiasms. It's unbelievable. And there is a Japanese Bible scholar named Hajime Hajime Mauri, we'll call him. I've never heard his name out loud. I've only ever read it, so that's my dodgy pronunciation. But he's used a computer-based algorithm to go through the scriptures and identify parallelisms and inverted parallelisms and chiasms. And you'll see every book thereafter, and it's been submitted. And you can go, it's a free website to access, and once you learn how to wrap your head around it all, it is amazing and beautiful. I don't always agree with how it's mapped out. There's a few things I'm like, I've heard other people and I tend to agree with how they see it, but it's semantics on the whole. But the book of Job is mind-blowing. And what is going on is wonderfully beautiful and intricate. And we're not only going to see a chiasm in Job, but remember Daniel, we said what kind of chiasm was Daniel? Double, yeah. Double chiasm, or chiasm A and chiasm B. But we're not going to see that. But take chiasm A and make chiasm A a double chiasm in Job. And then make the subchiasms double chiasms. And there are little sections where which are often referred as pericope, or something like that. If you Google pericope, Pericope, and it means a little section of text. Every pericope of the book of Job has some form of parallelism, some form of chiasm. Now, my favorite breakdown of that is to explore what's going on in chapter 1, verse 1. And we don't see it in the English. In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. And it's like, well, what on earth is that? But there is a parallelism going on there. And if you really want to, if you've got time and your brain isn't about to explode, jump into chapter 3, verse 1, verse 2, and verse 3. And those are my favorite breakdowns. But there are some other breakdowns too that are just amazing. And just to see what's going on there, if that was done by any kind of human intent and not just mystical, supernatural, God inspiration type stuff, then that is absolutely mind-blowing. The fact that there's all this stuff that is just chiasm after chiasm after chiasm, the wonder and beauty of the brain behind it, that keeps on, as we discover this stuff and look at it and go, okay, this is the things that is drawing our attention and pulling us in and saying, this is it, it's the center, here's the point after point after point of this wonder and beauty. I don't get it. The fact that, it's taken a computer to really do the analytical work. So to map this stuff out, it has to be God. The way that it's written. Job is like the motherlode of chiasms. So long story short, the center of the book of Job ends up being chapter 28. I don't want to read the entire chapter here, but we can grab a little bit of it. It says this. I'll move to chapter 28 so that I can tell you which. So starting at verse 1. There is a mine for silver and a place where gold is refined. Iron is taken from the earth and copper is smelted from ore. Mortals put an end to the darkness. They search out the farthest recesses for ore in the blackest darkness. See, chapter 28 opens with the author saying poetically, and I believe this is the voice of Job, if I remember correctly. Job is saying, listen, humans, listen. Humans have been able to do incredible things. We've mined the hills for minerals and resources. And just to consider, in an ancient world, the work of mining, what that would have looked like. And yet they're able to do that. They're able to mine. They're able to bring stuff out. Human beings have done some incredible things when it comes to mining the hills for resources. Let's keep going, though. It says this. Far from human dwellings, they cut a shaft in the places untouched by human feet. Far from other people, they dangle and sway. The earth from which food comes is transformed below us by fire. Lapis lazuli. Thank you. Comes from its rock, and its dust contains nuggets of gold. No bird of prey knows that hidden path. No falcon's eye has seen it. Proud bees do not set foot on it, and no lion prowls there. People assault the flinty rock with their hands and lay bare the roots of the mountains. They tunnel through the rock. Their eyes see all the treasures. They search for sources of the rivers and bring hidden things to light. All right. We've done pretty great things, haven't we? Pretty amazing things. They've been all over looking for unbelievable resources. But let's keep going. It says this. Continues. It says, but where can wisdom be found? Where does understanding dwell? No mortal comprehends its worth. It cannot be found in the land of the living. The deep says, it is not in me. The sea says, it is not with me. It cannot be bought with the finest gold, nor can its price be weighed out in silver. It cannot be bought with the gold of Ophir, with precious onyx or lapis lazuli. Neither gold nor crystal can compare with it, nor can it be had for jewels of gold. Coral and jasper are not worth of mention. The price of wisdom is beyond rubies. The topaz of Cush cannot compare with it. It cannot be bought with pure gold. Where then does wisdom come from? Where does understanding dwell? It is hidden from the eyes of every living thing, concealed even from the birds of the sky. Destruction and death, say only a rumor of it has reached our ears. God understands the way of it, and he alone knows where it dwells, for he views the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. When he established the force of the wind and measured out the waters, he made a decree for the rain and a path for the thunderstorm. Then he looked at wisdom and appraised it. He confirmed it and tested it. He said to the human race, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to shun evil is understanding. Man, that's a beautiful piece of poetry right there. That is a phenomenal chunk of literature. And what irritates me is how familiar I am with the book of Job. I would have said I was very familiar personally, academically, because I've looked at this quite a lot. And I was very familiar with Job. And how many times have I read over Job 28 and never appreciated the depth of the poetry of what's being said there until I realized it was the center of a chiasm. It's this beautiful thing where humans have done unbelievable things, but wisdom, they've never been able to mine wisdom out of the hills. In all their search for gold and gems and beauty, they've never encountered wisdom in all of their mine shafts. Only God knows where wisdom comes from. Now, think about all the larger context of the book of Job, and think about this whole book as a question about human suffering. This whole drama is about why suffering. And the center of the chiasm, it tells us that In all the midst of our suffering, what we really lack is true wisdom. What we really lack is perspective. Is the word that we're going to use for Job. Perspective. I've mentioned it a couple of times. You see, Job is all about perspective. Let me explain. The whole point of chapter 28 is that the true wisdom belongs to God. And only he knows where to find it. And only he can unearth the amazing treasures of wisdom that come from his divine perspective. This is an incredible treasure to be buried in the center of a play about a guy who loses everything. Which leads me to my final thought. Job does not end with an explanation. This whole play and this whole drama that goes on and on and on for almost 40 chapters, in fact more than 40 chapters, has no explanation at the end of it. You get to the end and there's no resolution. There's the happy ending, but there's no resolution. After God shows up to throttle Job, you want God to end the discourse with an explanation. But God interrupts all these horrible friends, and you want God to tell Job all the backstory about why what's happened has happened, about this bet, and about how he proved he was really good, and so on and so forth, and Satan lost, and all that sort of stuff. I mean, doesn't Job at least get to see what we've seen? Surely that would be fair. We know from the get-go that there's this bet. And you kind of think, wouldn't it be nice for Job to understand? But after all of this, after enduring all of this, Job doesn't get an explanation from God, because that's how life is, isn't it? How many times have we had accusations thrown at us where people go like, but if God was real, I would know why X, Y, Z. And you kind of go like, well, yeah, but that's not how life works. And that feels incredibly frustrating and incredibly glib almost, to kind of just go like, well, that's not how life works. But actually, this is what the Bible teaches. You know, we don't get it. We don't just get, this little, after all, when things start to turn the corner, to go like, well, if you just got to look and go like, this is where, I've suffered this to do this. And we kind of do a disservice to that. Sometimes just suffering sucks. There you are, there's a massive theological statement for you. But we don't get to know the backstory. Job doesn't get to know about this heavenly bet. And do you remember where the whole story started? Because God was willing to lay a wager on Job. God was so impressed by Job that he was willing to. And it's just a totally asinine setup to the story, God and Satan making this wager. And this is so weird when you step back from it. Because it actually, for me, it kind of contradicts everything that we know about God. It kind of makes him sound like the Roman and Greek gods of old, who kind of just go, human beings are just chess pieces, and they're playing a game with them. Actually, we all know that this is weird because none of us use it to explain suffering in our own lives, do we? This story, we don't go like, maybe there was a bet. Maybe I've experienced such a thing because, God's so pleased with me. And I am so humble. See, it's ridiculous, but we get to know the backstory. And can you imagine how things would have changed if Job knew that his suffering was coming as a result of a heavenly wager that rested on God's beaming confidence in him? I think actually I would have had more questions. That's great, Lord. Thank you so much for having confidence in me, but why did you kill my children? Or not why did you, but why did you allow Satan to kill my children? See, Job is, for me, about perspective. The author of Job is inviting us to consider the infinite and eternal possibilities that could lie behind our suffering. And I would say the author here, he or she is even suggesting the foolishness, the ridiculousness, like how many possibilities could be going on in the heavens to know that God sees things that we could never begin to see and understand. God can mine wisdom from the hills of suffering as easily as man mines minerals from the mountains. Even while suffering, we are invited to trust the story. I wanted to read these words from chapter 28 one more time as a closer. It says this, it says, "Where then does wisdom come from? Where does understanding dwell? It is hidden from the eyes of every living thing, concealed from the birds of the sky. Destruction and death say only a rumor of it has reached our ears. God understands and knows the way of it. He alone knows where it dwells, for he views the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. When he established the force of the wind and measured out the waters, when he made a decree for the rain and a path for the thunderstorm, when he looked at wisdom and appraised it, he confirmed it and tested it. He said to the human race, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to shun evil is understanding." See, Job is an amazing book. It just keeps going. There's so much to mine out of this book. And really, we've only just scratched the surface here. Because actually, like I said, it's the mother load of chiasms, and we could have spent we might do one day, do a whole series on the chiasms in Job to try to mine all the wisdom that's in here. And I guess the takeaway that we have from this is one of perspective and rooting our experiences in the perspective of the heavens so that we can trust the story of God in our lives. See, I don't think, well, I know because of the way that God describes himself, he is not like the gods of Rome or Greece and playing chess with us. That's not how a loving God works and how he enacts. That's not how a God who's willing to send his son to be born in a manger. It's not how it happens, but there's so much in this for us to go like, there's this heavenly perspective that as we walk through life, as we, as stuff comes up, as things happen, as we experience suffering, to go, there's this perspective that we just do not get to see. But God does. And he knows. And he sees the beginning from the end, and it's fine not to get an answer. I know that kind of sucks because we all want answers. There's things I want answers for in my life. Situations that are horrible and terrible and awful that I would love to be able to go like, yeah, but, we've sung a song this morning, Grayson's Gardens. Beauty from ashes, all that sort of thing. And we kind of go like, well, yes, that does happen. Absolutely does happen. And our hope is that as we walk more in the kingdom, that we see it happen more and more and more. But it doesn't always happen. And we certainly don't get to understand where those graves first happened. Surely it would be just better if we all experienced Eden in our lives all the time. I mean, that's what we originally should have had. And that's what the promise of the coming kingdom is. But we get to hold this perspective of God sees the beginning and the end. He knows where wisdom truly is. And we get to mine it as well. We get to partner with him in this. But also we get to trust that he knows us. And that the fear of the Lord is wisdom, and to shun evil is understanding. We get to do that. We get to love even in the midst of all things hard and horrible. Happy New Year. He says jokingly, well, not jokingly, but actually, like we all know, don't we? Like our hopes for 2025 is like, I don't know about you, but we saw, I'm going to have to wrap up in a moment. The amount of posts we saw, 2024 wasn't the year I hoped it was going to be, but here's to 2025, let's make it better. And you're like, we all know at some point there's going to be something hard. Good news for you. How we choose to respond to those difficult things is what's going to define us. Do we respond with wisdom, knowing that God, the Lord, knows the beginning and the end, knows the story, but there's this backstory, there's this perspective that we don't get. And actually we get to shun evil, we get to push into love and respond with love. What a testimony, what a story that would be to our friends, family, and neighbours, that we respond differently because we choose to. That's what partnership looks like with God. It's a choice. That's what Job does in all of this. Amen. Amen.